All right, here are the season futures for Western Canadian teams according to FanDuel. The Edmonton Oilers, the only Western Canadian team currently in a playoff position. Edmonton trying to make their third straight Stanley Cup final. Winnipeg and Calgary both 11 points out of the final Western Conference wild card spot.
It's time for Hey, I'm Talking Here with Frankie Corrado.
My guy Frankie's here. We're going to set you up for the unofficial second half of the National Hockey League season, beginning in the Western Conference and beginning with the Edmonton Oilers. And Frankie is a former defenseman. I couldn't wait to ask you about Paul Coffey potentially returning to the Oilers bench and running that defense. And the interesting thing about Coffey was didn't really have any coaching experience the first time around, and it worked out really well. He did a great job. Decided it wasn't for him. Now they brought him back, but there are reports that maybe he and head coach Chris Knobloch don't exactly see eye to eye. So is this a good thing in your mind? As someone who's actually been in an NHL dressing room, like, is that an awkward thing for a player?
I mean, it's probably a good thing because they were way better defensively last year when Paul Coffey was there, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've seen that there's different ways of assistant coaches communicating things to players where maybe it's the language that you're using, maybe it's the way that you address it, or maybe you let things fester a little too long because you think that players are just going to understand it. We don't know the exact dynamic, but you can't argue with the results. The results are they were a pretty good defensive team on paper the last couple seasons, and it's largely the same group of players that are there. It's Bouchard, it's Ekholm, it's Nurse, it's Emberson, it's Jake Wallman. So what happened? Why is it different?
Right.
So you bring back a coach that maybe has the tone and the language that you're looking for those players, and maybe that's what helps change things. You've changed your goaltender at this point, so what else are you trying to do? You're trying to win a Stanley Cup. See if you get the bump back from Paul Coffey.
Evan Bouchard thrived under Paul Coffey, really thrived under him. Do you see a need that the Oilers could potentially fill, Frankie, between now and the deadline next Friday?
I find it interesting that if you just look at their roster, right, you see it's top line that's loaded, McDavid, Hyman, Nugent, Hopkins. Then you look at a second line with Draisaitl and some combination of maybe it's Savoy, maybe it's Podkolzin, whatever, Kasperi Kapanen.
Yeah.
You look at it on paper and you're like, well, I'd like to see someone jump off the page a little bit more on the second line with Leon Draisaitl. But then at the same time, you look at how much offense the team actually gets. Expected goals, they're top 5 in the NHL. But they're pretty messy defensively.
Yeah.
So I guess looking at it on paper, you're like, I would like to see a little bit more in the middle six, but it's actually not an issue. And then on the back end, it's a lot of the same guys that are good players. They're just not as organized or as stout defensively as they should be. It's a long way of saying, if you wanted to add a depth defenseman, sure. If you wanted to add a player of impact up front or even on the back end, go for it. I think it's more about those guys playing to their capabilities because they're guys that have largely done it already.
Now, we heard from the insiders earlier in the show, Frankie, and we heard about the continued interest in Elias Pettersson out of Vancouver, despite the contract. Lots of interest. The talent is tantalizing, obviously. If you're the Canucks, they've already let go of Quinn Hughes. They're starting the rebuild. Would you want to potentially get a bidding war going between now and next Friday and try to move him now and eliminate the distraction? Or do you wait for that draft floor and see if maybe there's a lot of draft capital you could bring back?
If you have a deal that is imminent where you feel like you could set yourself up, similar to the Quinn Hughes deal, where you're like, we got to do this, go ahead, by all means. But if it's not there and you're just going to force it, I would look at it this way. If you trade Elias Pettersson today and he plays the exact same, if you don't trade Elias Pettersson today and he plays the exact same way he's played through the rest of the season, you look at it at the draft and you say, hasn't gone any higher or any lower. What we're going to get today is when we're going to get tomorrow, and we're a rebuilding team, and we'll make the trade.
Yeah.
But if for some reason, you talked about tantalizing, talk about, maybe the potential, how good he can be because we've seen it in the past, and he has an unbelievable last 25 games or so, and teams look at that potential and say, now's the time. I got to strike. Maybe you can get a little bit more at that point. So I wouldn't be in a rush to do it. If the deal in 10 days is awesome, go for it. But if it's not, I think you give him a little bit of time to play himself up.
The one thing I always wonder about Elias Pettersson, and this is just a random thought, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. To me, he would be ideal in a market where no one really cares about the National Hockey League.
Right, but that's not a bad thing.
No, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm
not
saying
for
that
everyone.
maybe that's where he needs to be his best player.
You know that the thing that maybe hurts his ability to get traded is other teams have built a really nice cap structure where like their first line center might not make as much as Elias Pettersson, and the cap is going up for sure. But I think about a team, let's just use a team like Montreal, for example, right? Like Nick Suzuki makes well under $10 million a year.
Right.
So you're like, okay, he's not as good as Nick Suzuki. He's going to be my second line center. Like, I feel like teams don't want to disrupt their cap situation.
For sure.
Even though they're going to have more flexibility, but it's something that teams are cognizant of.
Let's talk about Nazem Kadri. We've been talking about Nazem Kadri all year long as a potential player that a lot of teams would obviously love to add at the deadline. But we've also talked a lot about the fact that Nazem Kadri and his family love it in Calgary. They love living in Calgary. They love being there, and it doesn't seem like he's in a huge rush to move on at this point. But let's say the team was able to convince him that there was a destination where he would really fit in well. Do you see an ideal fit out there for Nazem Kadri?
I think 3 jump off the page right away for me. I think of Minnesota in the Western Conference, right? Like in a battle in the Central Division, but you've already went out and you got Quinn Hughes.
Yeah.
I mean, why not get Nazem Kadri? And he fits the kind of game that team wants to play. And think about what they would throw at you down the middle of the ice. It would be Kadri, Hartman, Eriksson Ek. A lot of guys that are hard to play against, like a lot of snarl. Like he just fits that identity. And I guess if you go to the Eastern Conference, I'm thinking of teams that are good that need help down the middle. Carolina Hurricanes, like, you know, they could always use another centerman, it feels like. And Detroit. Detroit is finally, let's call it, on the precipice of making the playoffs. And Larkin has had to do a lot there for a long time. Then you're going Kopp, you're going Comfer, you're going Rasmussen. I mean, if Nazem Kadri was there, he's potentially playing with, you know, Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat. It's a pretty good second line, right? Like that bolsters things big time, and they've been looking for a centerman. So those are the 3 that I think jump off the page right away for Kadri.
I know our friend James Duthie is desperately hoping that Nazem Kadri changes his mind and wants to be traded somewhere just so we have something to talk about next Friday. As for the Winnipeg Jets, we talked about the fact that they and the Flames are both equally far back in the Western Conference playoff race, and yet a lot of people still believe, especially after Connor Hellebuck's incredible performance at the Olympics, that maybe the Jets have an opportunity. Do you feel that way? Should they be adding at the deadline, or should they start selling pieces and really start to focus on next season?
It might be one of those things where you start to sell some pieces, you acquire some assets, and you get ready for next year. And it's not a knock on the players there, but the reality is they have been a team that has relied on one line for a long time. Josh Morrissey is hurt right now, so his status is up in the air, and there's a lot of teams in front of them. And the teams that are in front of them, if it's the Central teams, good luck catching them. You know, if you're trying to catch a wild card team, it just doesn't feel like it's in the cards for them.
Yeah.
So if you're looking down the barrel of trading Logan Stanley,
About to be a free agent.
right?
Yeah.
Luke Schenn, I think a lot of teams would value his character and Stanley Cup winning, and so those are the types of moves that you're looking at if you're Winnipeg at this point.
Can I just quickly ask you about there's a lot of talk about Cole Perfetti moving out of town and Shane Wright maybe coming to town. I'm not saying it's a one-for-one deal or anything. I'm just saying long-term, does that make sense to you? You're adding a center at that point, for sure.
I think what we have to keep in mind with Cole Perfetti is that, he had a high ankle sprain. I believe it was the last preseason game.
Okay.
And so when you have the high ankle sprain at that point in the season, A, you miss time. B, you come back, you're not feeling yourself for a long time. Like, I had a high ankle sprain. I taped my ankle, like, for a year afterwards. Partly because, like, I felt like I needed it, but at the same time, it's like, it's one of those injuries that stays in your head for a little while. I wouldn't give up on Cole Perfetti yet. Not that you'd be giving up on him, but I feel like he has shown that he can take a step, and this year ultimately wasn't able to do it. And with this season essentially being a wash for them, have a good summer, show that you can do it again next year because they need him. Like, the reality is Winnipeg needs the players that they draft to be very productive at the NHL level, and he is one of those guys.
Okay, Frankie, stick tight, hang tight, stick around.
We'll figure it out.
I'll figure it all out. But I know this, after the break, we're going to the Eastern Conference. Frankie's going to set us up by chatting about the Habs, the Sens, and the Toronto Maple Leafs.